Hey everybody, welcome to the Say More section. This is absolutely going to be my favorite part of the podcast because I love to just say more, even when it's totally unnecessary. I think there are going to be times where it is very necessary because these conversations I expect are going to be very rich and deep, and there's definitely things we're going to have to let be in the moment that we're got to expand upon later. So I'm excited about this probably more than anything that we're doing.
You know why you're more excited than anything that we're doing? Because it's what we're doing right now.
I know. Yes. I'm
That's
just
my
happy to
theory.
also be doing it right now. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so we had our first podcast and went back and listened to it. I'll be pretty candid about it. And just, there were some things that as we were talking about, just felt like really needed to kind of dive back into and just add a little bit more clarity because I think sometimes you and I have reference points for what we're talking about or meaning, but since other people are listening to this, they're going to not necessarily have a clue what we're talking about. So, yeah. So there were some questions. Do you want to go ahead and lead me through the first question?
Well, I wanted to clarify one thing that I said. We were talking about aging.
Yay!
Okay, so anyways, I had said, as you get older, you slow down, your
Hmm.
body slows down, and it's very natural to slow down. But there I wanted to clarify that, I don't believe that everybody like I what I'm into is just getting right with where you're going as far as your aging and just accepting reality. That doesn't mean your mind ages. That doesn't mean you have to lay around, and not travel and stuff. There's plenty
Right.
of people in their 90s that travel and do fun things and everything like that. I just mean it's a different stage of your life. In India, it's called like householder age when you're raising kids. And
Gotcha.
that's usually a time, it's not a time that you have time to go inward and look at the spiritual journey. I have never, had a family as far as like a family that lives here in America, a husband and kids that live here. My kids live way over in India.
Right.
So I've always had a lot of time to spend on this stuff. But the average person, you have the householder age stage of your life. And then, when you're more retired and have more time, then you have more time to sort of go inward. Take it.
Gotcha. Right on.
That's
Yeah.
that's what I wanted to say. I didn't mean that all older people are, not supposed to travel and have fun and all that, because I just think I love getting older.
Oh
So
yeah. I mean, and I I think I was afraid to get older as a in my 20s. I remember kind of being like, oh man, I got to get all this stuff done because when I'm 40 or when I'm 50 or whatever, I'm going to have to slow down. And I think to your point is you're talking about slowing down the internal world and slowing down and taking a moment to really go inward and process and have a self-reflection experience instead of the busy life of being whatever, career, parent, et cetera, et cetera. You do have more time to kind of to yourself after you get through all that. And by the way, I am very much so looking forward to all my kids going to college at some point and getting the hell out of my house. Not because I don't love them, but because I know that will be that'll be a fun phase for Meg and I because, we'll be in our mid 40s by the time they're all out. And we'll have a lot of our life to be able to do what I was afraid we wouldn't be able to do. So yeah, it is. I catch your point, and I think that was good to
to
clarify.
clarify that a little bit, because someone would think, well, oh, I'm 75 or I'm 80 and I'm still, doing and great, do fun things. Like my mom was wearing leather mini skirts and leather boots up past her knees up until just a few years ago, and she's 81 now.
Hey, good for her. If my grandpa Lloyd was around, he would definitely aim towards trying to talk to your mom because my grandpa's the same way. Not my grandpa doesn't wear leather miniskirts, of course, but he 93 this year, and he just finished building his last house. And every day he gets up, he goes out on his skid steer and just starts doing stuff by the old farm. I mean, he can't sit still; he has to move, and he recognizes now he needs to slow down in his internal world for sure. But I do think the physical activity of it, he's very lonely. He doesn't have anybody. So I don't think he has that peaceful internal world when he's by himself. It's TV or the trauma of of all of his guilt and loneliness, and I don't think he took that time over the years to have that, that self-reflection. So yeah, it's a balance, man.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Sean. I mean, that's what I think is big time missing in
Yeah.
our world is people getting comfortable with being alone with themselves. There's so much distraction in the world, and then once you are forced to, whether it's in a quarantine or as you get older or whatever it is, or breakup or whatever, um, you have to be able to not go into a depression, or it would be great if you didn't go into depression every time
Right.
something like that happens. So yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so I have a couple questions for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like questions.
So you were talking about the whole church experience, and
Yes.
you had said that that your dad your dad didn't want to go to church, your mom went to church, it was a given, and then that sort of became like a little bit of a conundrum in your head a little bit, but you didn't say more about that. How did that dovetail into your spiritual journey?
Well, so yeah, good point. So look, I think the biggest thing to take is looking back now, I can see that there was some confliction.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, I'm sure I was still looking for approval. I still wanted to, I was a very respectable kid. I don't think I caused them too many problems. I wasn't rebellious, and I was generally very obedient as a kid. So I did go to church for a long time. So that was probably, I don't know, 9, 10, and we were at a different church. Kind of getting into junior high, if I couldn't not go to church, couldn't not go to church, then I found a way to go be at a church with my cousins. So we live really close with my one of my cousins is exact same age, practically my sister, one of my closest family members now. And they were going to a different church, and they had a more active youth program. So because I couldn't just rebel completely, I found I guess a positive outlet at the time. And I was playing, I played music, so I was able to join the worship band, and I was able to participate. So I found a way of connecting. So when I did go to a different church and I was part of the youth program, I made a lot of friends, and that's when I started doing kind of my own version of church, where I was doing missions trips. We went out west, and we actually went to some Indian reservations and helped rebuild some houses that were in some impoverished areas. That was a trip. So we traveled a good bit. Doing missions. Obviously, the evangelist aspect of it was in there. But then we also we performed at different church events too, kind of around the Midwest. So, I mean, I had a very active church life, and it gave me the ability to have somewhat of a spiritual experience, even though I didn't want to go in the first place. So, and that is when I've had some of the more profound church, or well, I guess more profound spiritual experiences was on, a particular mission trip where I mentioned I spoke tongues. That was, I think I was maybe 13, 14. And that was coming back from one of those mission trips. And I think, I remember very clearly that as much as I tried to assimilate into the culture of our youth group, our youth trips and all that, I still struggled with really buying into Christianity as a whole. I had a lot of questions. There was a lot of things that didn't quite add up for me that I kind of let go of because I was having a good time, and I was such a participant in it that eventually when I was 16 they resurfaced. And when they resurfaced, that was ultimately what made me leave the church, was some of these things. I was like, well, I can't rectify this question that doesn't seem to have an answer. So
Not a religious answer.
not a religious, yeah, at the time there was not an answer, period. But yes, it did not have a religious answer. And so I had a really bad relationship with Christianity for about 12 years after leaving the church, but have recently come to respect and understand the value and purpose that Christianity can bring.
Okay, well, that's all nice and good. But
Sorry. Yeah.
I want to know, like,
You're going to get that a lot. Cool. Good story, but
so
you didn't answer my question.
That was the PG version.
Oh, okay. Oh, you want the real shit.
So it's like, first of all, when you were doing the, mission trip, did it feel right to you? Like you were going to play music. Did you just focus on playing music and not, or do you remember trying to turn anybody Christian or seeing that and feeling uncomfortable with it? It could be just my projection. Okay.
Yes.
That's what I want to know about.
Yes. Oh, I hated the evangelism aspect of it. In fact, that's been something I've had to really let go of, the frustration and anger that I have for the evangelism part of it. I think my experience was, why can't we just share the experience with each other? Why does it have to be, this is right, and we're going to show you what's right? As Christians, we're going to show you what's right because you're wrong. I mean, that's what I think I struggled with, was having the feeling to go out and evangelize means that there's an innate sense that what you have to offer is more valuable or more correct than any other religion. And I hate that. I just don't like that feeling, because what my spiritual journey has shown me is how individualized it is, how very meticulously specific it is to your own experience. And I think you can draw inspiration from religions of all kinds, but ultimately religion gets you to the edge of the trees where the wilderness starts, and then you got to go out there. And even, over the last, I guess, 5-10 years, I do go to Christmas Eve service with my mom. And there was a point over here, and I almost walked out, which would have been a bad move. But the minister was talking about how this is probably 10 years ago now, how excited they were that they did a missions trip to Nepal and were sending hundreds or thousands of Bibles over to convert people from Buddhism. And I almost burst out laughing. Like, if you think you're going to give somebody in Nepal who's a Buddhist something more than they already have, you know nothing about Buddhism and the beauty of that philosophy. And I was fucking mad. I was just like, this is ridiculous. Like, thank you for pulling this out of me, by the way. I just don't understand that thought process. Hypocritically, I have done this many times, I'm sure, as you know, and you probably watched it. So I respect that I have walked that, and that's why I've tried to get over my own shit about my hangups, because my hangup with Christianity was something I was hung up with myself. But in any case, like it's just really aggravating to me. And I think what converted my thought process was the story of Buddha, Siddhartha. At one point, after he had reached enlightenment, he had this days-long argument with a Christian, and eventually the Christian man came to realize that what the Buddha had to offer was more profound than his faith. And he said, well, I'm going to renounce Christianity and become a Buddhist now. And Buddha said, no, I encourage you to maintain your religion, your faith, your ideas, your philosophies, because that religion and faith that you had brought you to this place of enlightenment. And that was so fucking beautiful, because it wasn't about being right. It was about being correct and accurate to the whole of the situation. And that is true wisdom, I think, where, yes, you're arguing, but ultimately we have to be honest with the fact that all paths lead to that enlightenment. And so I think that's my biggest hang up is, if you think that your path is going to be the path for everybody, I challenge you to look otherwise, because I don't see that as absolutely true. So.
Yep. That's good. So is that think the main thing of why you turned away from church? Do you remember exactly why?
Oh, it was a plethora.
It was just one thing on top of another. Because for me, it was the body and the church, and then the communion. Those were two things that turned me against church, and those things turned me, well, forever, really.
Yeah.
And then same thing as I came to, I was quite against Christianity for so many years, and now I totally understand, and I can see the parallels, and I can see the beauty, and I respect everybody's beliefs now. But it's kind of like the pendulum. Whenever you're one way, it's got to fly the other way too, and then till it settles in the middle, which is what the Buddha is all about, settling in the Buddha, in the Buddha, settling in the middle.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So is it a plethora of things that turned you? Do you remember what those things were?
There was a couple instances of, like, friends of mine, whose father was a deacon of the church, and turns out that he was physically abusing both of his kids. Mm-hmm. They wanted to deal with it in the church instead of making it, go to the authorities with it. That was, it. Yes, I understand that spirituality and spiritual practices in a church community is a powerful thing. However, there's also the fact that, what's happening to these children is something that is not something that shouldn't be dealt with on an authoritative, government kind of way. I mean, he should be locked away for that. And I don't know to what extent, but I was close enough to know that it was real. There was a lot of things with, well, you can't worship if you weren't baptized in this specific church. You could have been baptized in another church, but it's got to be this church that you got to be baptized in. And then, ultimately at that time, when I was a little bit older, after I had already left, kind of the icing on the cake was I have a cousin who's gay, and who actually is getting married in February, which I'm really excited about his wedding. And he had come out in high school or towards the end of it, and he is a performer's performer. He's always a light. He's always just so joyful, and he is amazing voice, amazing performer. Went to conservatory, Cincinnati Conservatory. He works at Disney as a performer. He would sing at the church and lead worship all the time. As soon as he came out that he was gay, they said that he could no longer participate in worship. And this is somebody, from my opinion or perspective, who embodies the ideal Christian person, somebody with the morals and the code and the trying to do and be the right kind of person for their life, for everybody's life, doesn't want to hurt anybody. And you are isolating one aspect of his personal sexual life that is none of your business anyways. And that was kind of just like, I can't be a part of an organization that can't see past that, because we have to be able to see past that. You don't have to agree with it, but you can't make one aspect of somebody the whole of them. And as we've learned, obviously, that was, 14, 15 years ago. And now we're at the point where socially and culturally, fortunately, thank God, we are coming to realize that, we all live different lives, and we can't take something like that. And I mean, you just took a young man's lifeline away from him because of something that he's probably been struggling with, but has to feel like I have to be honest about this, knowing he's a smart kid. He knew what that was going to mean, and he was honest anyway. So since that, and having that kind of close experience, it had nothing to do with me, but having that experience with a family member, I have an utmost respect for somebody who has had to go through that process because fuck, man, I'm going to be honest, even though I'm going to basically get chastised or shunned for it.
Mm-hmm.
That takes a lot. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that there was a lot of stuff like that, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah. That didn't compute in your head,
No.
and it's so interesting, to me and that's what's interesting to me. That's why it's like, why does that not compute in your head, but somebody else who it goes to the same church, it's perfectly fine.
I
It's
know.
like so we have it's like we have so many different beliefs and ways of looking at things, and it's just interesting. And what I love is to be curious about all of it instead of being condemning
Yeah.
and saying, well, you're just not smart if you don't question it.
Right.
We don't want to say that. That's usually sometimes what seekers start off as, because again, their pendulum's going way, and they have to, like, it's almost like they have to believe that themselves, so they have to go way over here. And then once you land in the middle, you start to see it's just where somebody's at, and it's
Right.
just their
Right.
experience. And that's what I want to be, is I just want to be curious about why do you look at things this way, and
Right.
it's hard for me because I come from an extremely opinionated family. You can tell because you know me. I can be quite opinionated. But
You're gonna
I
use that pot? You're gonna use that pot? That's the pot you chose? Sorry. I don't mean to cut you.
have my sister, right?
Sorry.
And but I try, as I'm, with age and wisdom and mellowness, I'm trying to not be as opinionated and just be more open to everything, and
Yeah.
curious about everything and everyone. Yeah.
Well, and that's I actually had this thought last week after we filmed the first episode. Because I was thinking about these questions, and there seems to be there's a difference between a human as a individual and a human as a culture. When you get a culture of humans, depending on that person's, depending on how attached or identified they are with that social culture,
Mm-hmm.
really changes how far they'll deviate from their own moral code. That's the ethical moral dilemma in moral being, what is your compass for right living? What is the ethical social aspect of right being? And it's funny that you could be a part of an organization that thinks one way. So for instance, in this situation, the church as a whole agreed that him being able to sing on stage was not within their code of conduct, I guess. I'm sure that there were people within the church organization that disagreed with that decision, but wouldn't speak out because then
Right.
they themselves would also be asked, or in question of their loyalty to that. So it's, man, it's really, I think that's my biggest qualm with not just Christianity, but religion of all kind. The deeper you get attached to the identity of I'm a Christian, the more you're going to succumb to the particular Christian values that social construct has, or that social culture has. That gets dangerous to me.
Well, and then how about just putting that into terms of the way, you and I live? It's like, it's not just about religion.
Right.
It's about the way you live.
Right.
I was just writing about that in my book today, actually, about how, the path that I wanted to be a musician had nothing to do with what my dad or my family thought would
Right.
be happiness and success. And it's the same with you being a musician. You've fought that your whole life,
Yeah.
and so have I. It's like, do we conform into what our family wants for us and what society thinks will make us happy, or do we follow my gut? And I had to follow my gut, as
Yeah.
I know you did
Yeah.
too, but I had to move to Nashville and follow my gut, and not working 9 to 5 was never going to be in my DNA. Like, I've been an entrepreneur and self-employed since I was 16.
Yeah. Well, and you came, man, when you came into it at that point.
That
Oh my
was
God.
so long ago.
No,
Watch it, buddy.
thank you.
Watch it,
You
buddy.
watched me check myself. No, I'm thinking like you went from fucking Canada, another country. Yes, I was about to say that. but
Okay.
but also like fuck man, like that was a huge, and your dad and your brother, you're businessmen. I mean, the music industry doesn't compute. My dad, at least my dad was pretty supportive, but I had to go into engineering as this is the more reputable version of being an artist. I don't think you had that option at that time. It was straight, I'm going to be a musician, an artist, and then I'm going to move to Nashville. I mean, that's a lot, you know.
Yeah, and I was an illegal alien. And every time I heard a siren, I thought they were coming to take me away. No, I swear to God, the first 2 years I lived here.
That sucks.
And then one time this guy's like, Corinne, they're not looking for a little blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl. They're looking for probably somebody from Mexico or know.
Yeah, they're not looking for Canadians, and that's the funny thing is this is the first time I've realized that somebody from Canada can be an illegal alien.
Well, we have this, and that's what's so interesting is we have the exact same immigration laws as Mexico.
Wow.
Exact same. Yeah, it's the exact same laws because it's a different country. There's no special considerations for Canadians. So the only reason why I was eventually, after 7 years, able to get a green card and then eventually my citizenship was because my dad was married to an American and living in the States and had his green card. So it was because I was single and between the age of 20 and 27. Like if I was 30 and married or something, it wouldn't have done any good. But because I was single and in my 20s, and that's how I got in to get a green card. That was the only way I got in.
Seems like such a silly reason. I mean,
it was tough, and it took 7 years. So I was here illegally that long.
Oh my God, the stress of that. Well, and that's funny to me. It's like, oh, your dad just remarried a American, so he's got his dual citizenship. So we'll just, go ahead. But I mean, some people come here to work, and they want to work, and they want to have the experience, but there's the process for that is obscene. You know, it's like, but
no, it's tough. It's tough for everybody. Immigration is not an easy process for anybody. And then I can't imagine somebody from a third world country trying to do it.
Oh, I know, man. Oh God, with the stigma and the geez.
Mm-hmm. Every time I meet anybody from another country, whether they're legal or not, I'm just amazed at the story of how they got here.
Oh,
absolutely amazed because I knew. Yeah, for me. Anyways, we got off topic just a little bit.
Oh yeah, we did. Sorry,
we never did that.
That's the say more section.
Yes, the say more. We're allowed to do that. I love that permission. This is really cool. So remember when I told them Melissa McCarthy, she was interviewed on the Smartless with the Smartless guys. It's Jason Bateman and Will Arnett and Sean from Will and Grace. And they're great podcasts. Anyways, they were interviewing Melissa McCarthy, and she said she was talking about her religious, how she turned away. And so anyways, I wanted to say in this exact words. So she attended a Catholic school, but the Catholic religion didn't make a whole lot of sense for her. And finally they had this world religion class. And so she was like, oh, we get to talk about all these world religions. And so she asked the nun, how did you know to become a Catholic? And the nun said, well, God would have told me otherwise. And she said, there's billions of people in the world. She said she was only in 3rd or 4th grade. And with all these religions, you think that God wouldn't have told the other people too, right. And so when she questioned that, that's when she kind of dissed her and said, so I wanted to be clear about that. Did I do any better of a job of that?
I didn't specifically remember that question at the time. You had told me that story before, so I already knew that part of it. Yeah. So I think I filled in the gaps when you said that on the first part of it. But yes, that makes sense. That what you were aiming at on that. But yes, and I can imagine Melissa, the look on her face when she gets inquisitive is kind of like, she's like, it's very obvious. She's like, I'm about to call bullshit on this because it doesn't add up. And, and that's the interesting thing is from what I know about Catholicism, it is much more rigid, and this is the path. If you're a Catholic, the rules are very, very, very detailed. You don't have your own. Well, and I could be talking out of term. I don't know for sure, but I have family members who are Catholic that have said there is not the Protestant. You can commune with God. You commune with God through the Catholic Church. So,
Yes, there is that for sure.
So the fact that this woman had the answer of, well, because God told me, well, God shouldn't have I mean, that wouldn't be so in the Catholic Church. You would have gone to the head, priest or whatever. So, but that's the funny thing is it's like 7 billion people have to conform to the same mechanism and pathway to find God. I can't wrap my head around I'd have the same reaction as Melissa. It's like, I can't wrap my head around that.
Right. So why is it that we have that? You and I have that question, and most probably all the other people we're going to talk to have that same thing. And some people have it in fourth grade. Some people have it when they're 5. Some people have it when they're 30, 40, 50. Yeah. And so I think some people are meant to be the catalyst for other people. Like some people are meant to come and have that experience where they don't wake up at all.
Right.
And then like your cousin who you have these long, intense, she's very Orthodox Catholic, and you having these dialogues back and forth. It's like, if she wasn't like that, and if you weren't like that, you guys wouldn't have these dialogues in this relationship back and forth. So I always find the beauty in all the diversity. I try to see all of it.
Well, and that is something that I've really recently let go of, more completely is, I mean, there are people in my life that are very set in their spiritual way, but at least their perspective is vetted, and they recognize and have actually questioned how real it is to them and what it means to them. So even though we completely disagree on, like, I would not live my life, and I can tell that person I would never live my life like that. I just can't. But It's not just about the religious, like the outlooks and the way they structure or how they look at money and how they look, like everything is different. But we have grown over the last, 6 months or whatever, a more deeper mutual respect for each other because of that difference. It's not a thing where I can only respect somebody who agrees with my perspective. I can respect you if you hold something that dear and you recognize, like, listen, this doesn't have to make sense for you for me to live this way. We both get to that point, and then we just go deeper into the conversation, and then we're just talking perspective, and then we're pulling out the traumas of confusion or whatever. And then once you have accepted each other, like, listen, we're not going to agree on this, but what might we agree on? Or what might we be able to offer each other as perspective from these completely different opposite viewpoints? Man, that is when you get into some gorgeous, gorgeous shit. That is when it's just like, fuck, this is deep. And it doesn't matter what you bring out of it because you had that moment and you had that experience. And that experience is as rich as any wisdom that you can disagree about.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think, as long as we keep curious, that's the thing. And It's so needed in the world right now because we're so polarized and nobody's listening to each other. So, but it all starts with individual conversations. That's another reason why we wanted to start the podcast is to just have conversations about different beliefs and different paths, and not to belittle anybody, but really be curious about, when did this start for you? And why doesn't it start there for anybody else? And they went down this journey instead. And it's so interesting because we're all part of the human family. We're all here. We're all part of the human race. And we are a family, and the whole entire planet is a family. I know you and I believe that, and we want to have more conversations about that. So, so I want to And I know because we could talk forever.
We do have to end the Say More at some point.
You have to say more at some point, and plus we have another interview to do tonight. So
Yeah.
I wanted to end with, I was talking about Ram Dass, and I feel like I did a bad job of this part too. So I actually went back because I actually bought the movie. So there's a movie on anything on demand, your iTunes, your Amazon, that you can rent or buy, or you can go to the website too. And it's called Becoming Nobody. And it's there's been a lot of stories and a lot of interviews about Ram Dass. He passed away, I believe, last year sometime. Was a great spiritual teacher. And he started the movie off with this, and I actually wrote it down. So excuse me while I read, but I think it's actually really great for our podcast.
Absolutely.
And so he starts us off, and he says, in the beginning of the movie, he says, when I was born, I was donned a spacesuit for living on this plane. It was this body. This is my spacesuit. And it had a steering mechanism, my prefrontal lobe, and all the brain motor coordination stuff. And just how other astronauts learn how to grab things when they're learning to use their suit, so did I. And I got rewarded. I got little stars and kisses and hugs and all kinds of things just for learning how to use your spacesuit. So you get really good at using your spacesuit. And you get so good that you can no longer differentiate between yourself and your spacesuit. And everybody compliments you and says, what a nice suit you have. And you're constantly looking into other people's eyes just to make sure that you're wearing your suit correctly and you want approval. He says it's what I call somebody training. When you're born, you go into somebody training. Your parents know who they are, and they want you to be somebody. He says, my parents were very intent on making me somebody. They wanted me to achieve, to be responsible, to be healthy, be successful, and to bring them pride. And he says, the problem is that his spacesuit didn't fit. It didn't feel comfortable. And I feel like the people that we're going to be interviewing will be kind of the same way. It's like our spacesuit just didn't feel quite comfortable. And so that's the story of the becoming nobody and your spacesuit and the somebody training and then becoming nobody.
Hell yeah. No, that's awesome.
Not good?
That you put it well, but that's beautiful, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's enough said.
Enough said.
We'll get into that on another podcast.